Hey there, listener. It's Quinn, obviously. We launched private member podcast feeds for both of our shows. The Most Important Question, with just me and guests, and Not Right Now, the show I co-host with Claire Zolke. The member feeds are ad-free, which is awesome if you hate ads, and they have some super fun bonus content, including weekly off-topic banter and some recommendations, and monthly Q&As that you can't get anywhere else. It'll be $3 a month or $30 a year, because everything we make costs money to make, and we need more of your support. So head to importantnotimportant.com/upgrade to start your 30-day free trial right now. And when you do, you'll get these member feeds and everything else members can get right now. Stickers, your What Can I Do profile and personalized recommendations, access to my essays and the comment section, and so much other stuff. That's importantnotimportant.com/upgrade. The link, of course, is right in your show notes. It takes 1 minute and will automatically send you everything you need to get going. Thank you, thank you, thank you, truly, for supporting our work here and for giving a shit. Have a great rest of the day. Chronically parched is not something anyone in this country or anywhere should ever have to feel. But here we are. So how are towns and states making clean water more affordable, reliable, and less controversial? Because remember, it's fucking water. Look, you might feel like you're giving it all you got, but when you look around, things are a little dark out there. So you, our listeners and readers and viewers and users, whatever, across the world, want and demand more examples of fight and progress you can see, touch, feel, taste. And in these conversations, in this special series, in our partnership with our best friends at Run for Something, we're going to do that. We're giving you exactly what you asked for. Each of these episodes features 2 guests, both sourced from the Run for Something pipeline and graduating classes, so the next real generation of U.S. leaders all across the country. First, I'll introduce one young elected official at the state or local level who has actually made real measurable progress on an issue facing more Americans than ever before, but something that you'll notice. And then in the same episode, after that, I'll introduce a bright-eyed candidate who's currently running for a state legislature, for mayor, for city council, or for school board, who is similarly hell-bent on attacking the same issue in their own hometown or their state. And for all you know, one of these could be in yours or near yours or just have lessons that apply to yours. So you and I are going to find out together at the same time, live, what they're working on and why, where they've actually made measurable progress, where they've struggled, because that matters, and how their exact tactics and strategies can be adopted and transferred to other schools and school districts, towns, cities, and states across the country. I do have a request, though. If these conversations inspire you in any way, please do 2 things today. Because remember, these folks are only part of the thing. You got to do your part. Number 1, find out what office you or some actual young person you love and respect can run for at runforwhat.net. You would be surprised at how many amazing offices go uncontested in this country. Number 2, please find and support incredible candidates endorsed by Run for Something and other amazing organizations we love at whatcanido.earth. And last, there is a third thing. Please share these. Sure, you can give us a 5-star review if you'd like, but also share these with somebody who might be into, for example, water. Because if you need this, and I need this, many more people need these conversations. So first off, today, a little context for our topic, drinking water. You think it wouldn't be complicated or controversial, but remember, folks, bad guys are real. So there is a lot of progress being made, even in the age of climate change and floods and all that. And the folks I've got on the show today are doing it in their districts, or they're running to, and they also have lessons for yours. Both of our folks today are from Michigan, no stranger to water issues. Introducing our incumbent. State Rep Lori Pahetsky is a Michigan-born millennial microbiologist serving her 4th term in the Michigan House of Representatives, where she serves on the Oversight Committee and is the chair of the Progressive Women's Coalition. Lori's mom was a nurse and her dad was a teamster, and that's basically all I need to know, but I'll give you some more detail. Lori sponsored legislation that became Michigan's Clean Energy and Jobs Act of 2023. She is the co-sponsor of legislation to make polluters pay, which is always great, and to amend Michigan's Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, which focuses on environmental cleanup standards and procedures, which would be stellar since, as you know, the EPA has, basically been abolished. Anyways, more good news. Let's talk to our candidate. Denzel McCampbell is a fine young community advocate and native Detroiter living and running for Detroit City Council District 7. Denzel was born and raised in the East Side and is a graduate of Michigan State University. He is dedicated to public service, to fighting day in and day out to increase access to democracy and representation for marginalized groups. He believes the Detroit city government, of which he would like to be part again, should be a responsive government that uses its resources to ensure that every neighborhood is well resourced and that every resident is able to have the fundamentals, adequate and truly affordable housing, public transportation, and access to water and opportunities and things like that to improve their lives and have their basic needs met. Denzel has deep knowledge and experience in organizing and advocating and working on all levels of government to effect change for his community. So there we go. Two amazing humans fighting for water and fighting for everything else. Let's find out what it means for their hometowns, for Michigan, and for yours. Lori Potsky, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today on our 7th version of audiovisual equipment. It's working. We got it. Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, you were in your 4th term of Michigan House of Representatives? That's exciting. That's very exciting. Nothing has happened in those 4 terms. It's been totally boring out there. Could you tell us a little bit about your district?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, my district is a portion of Northwest Detroit, North Redford Township, which is the suburb. Even just a little further outside, I have Northeast Livonia. So the district itself stretches from a pretty urban area to a more suburban area. When I first ran and first got acquainted with Run for Something, I was running in a extremely gerrymandered district. It was just the city of Livonia minus 1 square mile,
Sure, why not?
and it had been Republican held for quite some time. That seat, I ended up flipping it with a whole lot of help. We only flipped it by 227 votes. So, when folks talk about, I feel like I'm not making an impact, I wouldn't be here talking to you if people didn't make an impact. Because when you look at those numbers, every single piece of outreach that someone did in their spare time made that possible.
Yeah, 100%. We were just handing out, we have a few gated communities here that are very obnoxious about door knocking and things like that. And gentleman running for school board who's working with Run for Something, good guy. And this one community just won't let him in. And so we found some good neighbor friends that are in there and just gave him a bunch of stuff and said, just incognito, middle of the night, go drop these on doorsteps. Because like you said, 227 votes, everyone counts. I mean, Virginia, what was that? I was still in Los Angeles, I think. I feel like 6-7 years ago, they pulled a name out of a hat or some shit because there was one vote.
Yes.
Everything is working exactly as it's supposed to, Lori. All right. So, like I mentioned to you, the other voice our listeners will hear from today is Denzel McCampbell, who's running for Detroit City Council. Fabulous gentleman. Tell me, you are I believe there was a description online as the millennial microbiologist. Is that right? That's a great handle. Why did you run for office?
I got pissed off. There's a bit of a more articulate backstory there, but I was really just pissed off. Coming out of the 2016 election cycle, I am a queer woman who believes I should have bodily autonomy, and I was a scientist, and all of those things were kind of coming under attack. I, like a lot of people, I think, started paying more attention to more local levels of politics and government, namely the state legislature. And I saw that there were a lot of policies coming out of Lansing that had a basis in science, be that environmental, healthcare related, but no one really there to advocate for those scientific perspectives because there were no scientists.
Mm-hmm.
So I, with all of the hubris I could muster, was like, well, I'm just going to run and, we'll see what happens. And I really didn't think that I was going to win, in all
Hmm.
honesty. I thought I might move the needle a little bit, but I didn't win. And I got on some really cool, important committees from my perspective in my first term. And also, COVID ended up hitting in my
Hmm.
first term. So I think that perspective ended up being a little bit more useful than I originally planned on.
I've got a lot of questions, but mostly it really speaks to representation, doesn't it? It's like there were no scientists. Great. It's just like how we don't have any teachers. I think we've got like one nurse in the US House of Representatives. Yeah, it matters. So thank you for doing that. It's very helpful. So talk to me about how you got hooked up with our good friends at Run for Something. And then we're going to get into water here.
I was looking for all of the help I could get. I had no experience running for any type of office. So I was applying for all of the trainings I could, all of the, orgs that were willing to help young progressive candidates could get their foot in the door and get some education going and get some resources. And I was also in a really competitive primary. My opponent was also endorsed by Run for Something, and he and I get along fantastically. So there's no bad blood there or anything. But what I really appreciated was, it was a really competitive primary. So a lot of people that got involved were like, oh, it's one or the other. It cannot be both.
Mhm.
And that's not what Run for Something did. They were like, look, we want representation that both of you can bring.
Sure.
So let's try and do everything we can to support both of you in whatever you need, because you probably have different needs right now.
Yeah.
And they were very interested in my story and why I wanted to run and represent people and the perspective I could bring. And it was immensely helpful. There were so many questions that I, felt dumb asking, but got immediate help with. And obviously, fundraising support, connections with better ways to recruit like people power too, which is so, so helpful.
It's interesting because, like you said, I love the idea that they and you and your opponent were good sports about the whole thing because it's like we got to do all the things. So,
Yep.
like, why are we picking and choosing now? Which I understand that's obviously what a primary is for. We don't shy away from how the political sausage is made here, but it's got to be something. We've got to
Right.
do what we can to keep pushing and keep pushing, and that's what I think Amanda Lemon and I are on the same page most of the time, which is like rage texting about our idealism, but at the same time, like we'll take every step we can get along the way. And that
Exactly.
includes just getting more and more folks like yourself in there. So that's really great. So you came back to this idea of there's a lot of science-based stuff coming out of the state legislature, which, as I'm sure you're aware, like you said, you became more aware of that there is a state legislature and how they operate. And a lot of folks in the past 10 years have had that same awakening for a variety of reasons. All the trigger laws that kicked in the minute Roe v. Wade was turned down, and people realize some of these laws have been under the books for 100 years, and they go, who made those? And you go, well, congrats, it's your state legislatures. And if you're a person who's been yelling at people to get involved on the state and local level for a long time, you don't want to say, I told you so, but you're also like, welcome, let's do this.
Yes.
And now, obviously, more than ever, that is instrumental because it's kind of all we've got in a lot of ways. So, really helpful that you started before that. But you said there's a lot of science-based stuff coming out, and it's interesting. We kind of same time, early COVID, like came up with this fun little tagline called "Science for People Who Give a Shit." And there's two things there. One, for better or worse, and I feel like I say this a lot because of COVID and climate and all of these different things and poverty and our housing crisis. There's a lot more people that give a shit, fortunately and unfortunately, than ever before. So we try to reach them. But at the same time, science is everything at this point, right? I mean, it's in everything, and everyone became an amateur scientist in the past 5 years, again, for better or worse. But we're understanding that there's like fundamental pieces and building blocks of all these policies we choose or don't choose that can affect in a systemic way the science of our biology and our sociology and our public health and our climate and ecosystems and our water, obviously. So I don't think I have to explain to people why we decided to talk to two folks from Michigan about water. Obviously, on the international scene, you came right into that. It's been like 10 years, I think, since the Flint stuff became news, at least to the rest of the world. When you talk to folks around the state, and you talked a little bit about your district before, I know you're working on the pipes, all these different pieces. There's the bottled water fiasco. It's been going on forever. How do people feel about it now? Do they feel like there's been progress made? Is there something that they can touch and feel that at least, again, this is a big, complicated issue, that Michigan's going in the right direction? Hey, it's Quinn. So, as you might be aware, this whole thing started as a simple Hey, here's what you missed newsletter. And today we've turned that one little newsletter into this burgeoning media and tech empire, right? We've got over 50,000 readers in almost 100 countries and tens of thousands of podcast downloads a month and app visitors, and it all comes back to our email and website provider. Beehive not only helps us write and send these beautiful newsletters that actually get into people's inboxes, it also hosts our membership. It hosts our website. It gives us crazy best in class analytics with like unlimited ways to review our data. We can run polls and surveys and use custom fields. And also, it integrates with a ton of external tools. Their API lets us sync your email user profile to the profile on our app. So everything for you is streamlined and in sync, and you don't even see what's going on behind the curtain. It's great. So if you've ever considered starting a newsletter for your hometown, for book club, business, yourself, your art, whatever, Beehive has a deal for you here. You can sign up using my link and you get a 30-day free trial and 20% off for the first 3 months, which is a lot. So I'm going to read you the link, but you got to know it's also in the show notes and you can just click it. Okay. And understand that Beehive is spelled a little funny. It's beehive.com, but it's BEEHIV.com/VIA equals Quinn. Honestly, if you can remember that, congratulations. Otherwise, it's right in the show notes. Check out Beehive today. You guys will love it. We depend on it every minute of every day. So thanks for supporting our partners.
I think in some ways, yes, some ways, no. There are so many reasons that would happen to happen. Racism, systemic issues. But even if we just want to look at water infrastructure and isolate that piece, we have done tremendous amount in Michigan in going in and replacing our water infrastructure before it becomes a problem. And I think a lot of people see that when we're literally tearing up in front of their yards. It's an ever-present fear for people now, I think.
Sure.
But it's also a little hard to consistently get people to know about and recognize and be invested in, because it's sort of one of those out of sight, out of mind things.
Sure.
People don't necessarily look at that as critical infrastructure in a way they probably should. I think that there are also other issues related to water that we've made some headway on, but frankly, not nearly as much as we should. And I think those are also the issues that tend to get more coverage than something sort of like mundane and kind of deeply unsexy as water infrastructure. When you look at things like PFAS and microplastics, there's a ton of work that we need to be doing there. And there's headway, but not nearly as much as there could be, and frankly, as I think most people would want and expect.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, again, I really love infrastructure, and I've had a couple guests on talking about it. I'll send you a couple books that are great, and one is like a kid's graphic novel, and it's great. It's like, look at what's around you, even if you can't see it, right? Even if you never go to the part of town where the treatment plants are, right? Whatever it might be. It's the idea of like when you hit that switch on your light, whatever it is, it really helps to spend a day considering how that works, not just so you understand it, but for the gratitude of how many different people and how many different pieces and how many different systems interact to make it so your light turns on, to make sure that water comes out of your faucet, and to understand who the bastards are making the decisions when they cut it off, right? Or to not replace the pipe. Someone is deciding to keep you sick, basically. What lessons in all the billions you guys are spending to like you said, rip up these pipes and put in new ones, which again is really touch and feel. This is big work, and you are not unique in America to the respect that you have to replace aging infrastructure. What lessons, I guess, have been learned, because you're 4 terms in? Are there things you would change about these bills or updates or amendments going forward as this work continues that might be transferable to other places?
The longer you wait to address something, the more expensive and harder it gets to do. Flint was the light bulb moment for everyone. But this is a crisis that could happen to some degree in any community here in Michigan, because we all have these aging pipes, and there are funds available through the federal government and state assistance, but a community has to be below a certain threshold and meet a certain level of need in order to access and draw down those funds to replace their infrastructure in that way. And a lot of communities don't. But one, they desperately still need to replace infrastructure, and two, they don't actually have the funds available to do it
Hmm.
solo. So we need to just get better holistically, particularly when it comes to infrastructure, in looking prospectively and trying to address problems as we can rather than waiting until it's literally a crisis and we
Hmm.
have action levels popping up all across the state. That revenue has to come from somewhere eventually,
Hmm.
and politicians hate raising revenue. This is what happens when you don't. We have virtually, I should say, we have no plan. There are a lot of communities without resources that desperately need assistance in raising this infrastructure. And that's something that we could have been looking at a long time ago, but certainly since Flint.
Totally. Well, if we're talking about, and again, like you said, this is endemic everywhere. Part of it's federalism to bring the national government into it for a minute, because for huge infrastructure projects, traditionally, a lot of that money will come from there in some ways, even if it takes forever to be distributed, and every state and then locality treats it differently. The whole thing, right? We've seen that with every bill. But again, if we're looking at, assume we're not getting any money from the feds. Have you seen success? Are there learned lessons from local and state governments actually starting to work together on some of these things to find a common way? Because, like you said, local governments can't afford to do this shit. Like, whether we're talking roads or pipes or whatever.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, part of it is a structural issue just because of the way that we have historically funded and relied on the federal government for that. But I will say that, trying to connect our local governments to the statewide departments that are doing this work, we have made it a priority in previous budget cycles to set aside funds to try and help communities that are not going to qualify for federal funds, to make sure that they're not left hanging, because they simply can't do it without
Yeah.
some assistance, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, there absolutely have been lessons, but we've had to act faster now than we would have if we had just been approaching it this way since, probably before I got there.
But that's a tale of as old as time for everywhere. Michigan isn't, well, most people who don't understand geography, it's not on the east or west coast, so you wouldn't think, oh, storms. But like, you guys are dealing with real increased rains and flooding and erosion in a real way because you're on these enormous bodies of water, obviously,
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. But again, that's endemic throughout the country, like whatever
Yeah,
you're talking about. And like you said, we didn't start early enough. Now we have to do it. It's going to cost more, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. Like,
exactly.
you do have to do it, or it starts to be truly crippled in a lot of ways. One of my best friends works in a research hospital in Southwest Virginia. And when he got there, he's a real problem solver. And he's going to murder me for oversimplifying this, but they were basically like, make people stop coming to the emergency room so much. And that is such a complicated problem, but it's also very simple in a lot of ways because so many
Mhm.
people come in with heart pain and chest pain, and the doctors say, Steve, we've seen you 3 times this year. You have to take your heart medication. This is going to cost you so much money, especially if you took an ambulance, clogs up the emergency room, right? And we can't show up every day and make you do this. But if you do this, it will be less costly, both fiscally and to your health span, right? To everyone involved. And it's the same thing for everything. That maintenance goes a long way. And obviously, sometimes you got to replace the pipes, but that's where we are. And we do have to do that work. And as much as Michigan has been, unfortunately in the spotlight, nowhere else is safer from this. New York City's pipes are 1,000 years old. So, who are your allies when it comes to water in the state legislature, but also advocacy groups and other groups that are, again, advocating, or outside groups that are helping to write policy, either on the national or the state level for you all? Like, where can you
Yeah,
turn to for that?
there's sort of like a contingency of the environmental legislators, that have kind of just sort of owned these issues. And, we have term limits here in Michigan, so they've come and gone. But in terms of advocacy organizations, we work a lot with the Sierra Club, the Natural Resources Defense Council, but there's also a lot more like hyper localized groups. So, like
Hmm.
Moses in
Hmm.
Detroit deals a lot with affordability. I have
Hmm.
learned so much from them in terms of how this has just really been designed to disenfranchise, in my case, Detroiters, but there are communities all across the state and country like this. Detroit Action and People's Action, Michigan United has been fantastic. The League of Conservation Voters, they are getting into historically, obviously, always, conservation and environmentally focused, but also they've gotten into affordability areas. They've gotten into like pro democracy
Hmm.
areas. So, like, really kind of highlighting for people how all of these things are linked. But no, it's been really fantastic to sort of have a coalition of people statewide and more at a local level to raise awareness and bring other people into the issue too, because
Sure.
you mentioned this earlier, like, times are hard, everyone is just kind of overwhelmed all of the time, so you cannot possibly keep an eye on every crucial issue. So sometimes having people raise awareness in communities and sort of be trusted messengers for people is really helpful too, in getting people to understand why it's important.
Well, I love that because we ran a poll once. It was something along the lines of, "Have you ever considered running for local office?" And we got some incredible responses, but a lot of were like, "No, I'm terrified. Didn't know there's a local office. No one will like me. No, it seems too hard. I've never been to a city council." All these different things. And you're like, "You can go to a city council meeting. Yeah, I mean, you only need to make people like you for a little while." All these different things.
Yep.
But I understand the fear of it and the fear of I can campaign, I think it was Barack Obama was just, campaigning much easier than actually governing, which is true. But at the same time, there's always people who are already there doing the work that can help you along the way, like those allies, like you said, like those folks in the legislature that have come and gone. You're not going to have to show up and do the whole thing. There's always folks, and especially, again, someplace like Michigan where folks have been on the ground doing it because they have to,
Hmm.
and those are the best folks to learn from for sure. Like what's actually going to
Absolutely.
work in this bill? What is just a waste? How do we get Nestle out of here?
Well, and to give the history of some of that, again, we have term limits. So institutional knowledge is so, so valuable in this
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
And it's not going to come in most cases from sitting legislators because we've only been there for, a hot minute, really, when it comes down to it. So
Hmm.
having organizers and stakeholder groups that do have that institutional knowledge because they have been there fighting this battle consistently is so, so critical.
So, what does the future look like for how Michigan, again, like so many places, you are bailing out the boat, but also trying to plug the hole in a lot of ways, knowing more rains are coming, knowing more erosion's coming, things like that. You're fixing the pipes, which at one point like wasn't in the conversation, and now it is. It's along the way. Can you look ahead at all to go, what are we going to need to do next? What's the next thing that's sort of the intersection of achievable, but also something that'll make measurable progress that people can touch and feel?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on PFAS and microplastics, and I'm on the microplastics package. I think that those are real threats and they are very serious concerns for people. So I'm not trying to disregard those. But also, the landscape has fundamentally changed since I started in the legislature in 2019. People are trying to survive on a day to day basis now. So when you ask me what is the next big issue for me and what is something that I also think is achievable, it's water affordability,
Mhm.
just plain and simple. We had a package that was so well vetted and there was virtually no opposition. And it would be a whole separate podcast episode to talk about how we got to a point where it all fell apart in the end. But
Interested?
suffice just
Continue.
great, always available, and I will make sure that my tech works. But suffice to say, I know that, folks are going to hear from Denzel on this one too. Denzel's opponent killed that. The margin we had was one person, and she stopped showing up. And that is a program that would have been transformational for people under the best of circumstances, much less now
Mhm.
when the cost of everything is going up. People are losing their food assistance, healthcare is being held hostage and premiums are going to go up on, ACA coverage and everything. That package would have been a game changer for people in this state. And it is still so incredibly possible if we can just get, the actual politics of stuff out of the way. It had bipartisan support. I believe it still does. It's been reintroduced. That is one of my top priorities because it is a good bill package. Senator Stephanie Chang is leading the way on that, and she just did an immense amount of work to get everybody that could have a stake in it, with the exception of one, random commissioner somewhere, to be on board with it and still make sure that it did what it needed to do. And it was
Yeah.
important last term, but it is 1,000 times more important right now. So that is one of my top priorities to try and get done.
Thank you for sticking with your guns on that. The good and the bad news about the fact that we're fighting for the basics all over again is that it's so easy and often like cathartic to really draw a line in the sand with people about not that this wasn't incredibly important and aspirational and awesome, but when people like, oh, in the IRA, yes, we got a green bank, and how much money should and that's all awesome. I will argue about that all day. It's really excited. We're all coming from the same place that it should exist. Now we're like, do you believe that people's water should be shut off? If the answer
Exactly.
is yes, you're a bad guy. Like, I
Exactly.
have no problem. In fact, I'm excited to call you out and be like, oh, you think people's water should be shut off? Let's talk about that. How do you think people live? What do you think people need to live? It's
Right.
that and like dirty air. And one of the other conversations we've had is school lunches. It's just stuff that makes me, again, like kind of in a cathartic way, go haywire. Uh,
We had a 3-hour long hearing on that bill package because there were so many people who had their water shut off who wanted to come testify. And like, I have had my water shut off. That is a mortifying thing to disclose to a room full of people who probably cannot relate to it. So it was a 3-hour long hearing because if that many people want to come and like share in that way to explain why this is important, then we're doing it. And one of the Republicans, it was my committee at the time, but one of my Republican colleagues on that committee at one point asked them if they had Netflix accounts and if they had considered shutting off their Netflix in order to afford their water. And it was not my like most professional moment, but I wouldn't change a single thing about it because I don't know what he thinks you do. Do you think that people who cannot wash their hands or go get a glass of water or flush their toilet are spending a whole lot of time enjoying Netflix in their house?
there's a moment in the very first Avengers movie where someone, I don't remember how they get to that point, but basically the Hulk says, my secret is I'm always angry. And I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And that's okay. I'm going to ride that as long as necessary. I will burn out into the sun on that because I would have, however you handled that, I would have handled it much more poorly. And what are you going to do? It's just incredible. It's incredible. We can talk about bad guys all day. But yeah, what's next is like we're still fighting for the basic stuff. In fact, we're going backwards on a lot of this stuff, whatever it is, when they're, again, wastewater surveillance, using it for evil to try to find birth control in the water. And you're just like, okay, that's where we are. Got it. Master off. Not microplastics, though. Perfect. We're keeping it positive here. You guys are doing a lot of tremendous work. It has been like 10 years, which is crazy. I feel like I'm 1,000, but you are doing the work, and that's not complicated thing. You are replacing the pipes while people try to kidnap your governor, while you are dealing with bad guys who are mad about Netflix.
And us, actually.
Yeah,
Fun fact, the people who tried to kidnap her came to the Capitol looking for her, couldn't find her, and decided they were going to start assassinating us and live streaming it to lure her out.
awesome.
So that's
Great.
just a fun bit of bar trivia to keep in your back pocket.
But you're the monster that wants people to have water to drink. Perfect. Hang your hat on it. Well, that is what good representation's all about. And I'm sorry you went through that. It's, yeah, all we can do is keep fighting, I guess. Lori, what's a book you'd recommend to us? We get the Constitution, we get coloring books, we get fantasy, we get amazing nonfiction. It is truly your choice.
Lawless by Professor Leah Littman, who is, full disclosure, a friend of mine. But
Typical.
she is a law professor. She is just an incredible litigator. She's argued in front of the Supreme Court. She helped with the fight for reproductive rights here in Michigan, for LGBTQ rights here in Michigan. But she really just outlines how what we're seeing with the Supreme Court now is not a new phenomenon. This has been in the works for a really long time. There are absolutely moments where it's a bummer,
Mhm.
but there's also like a tangible call to action and here's what you can do to fix it. And it's absolutely essential reading for anybody living in America right now.
Perfect. Great. Awesome. We will add it to the list. We've got a bunch up on the bookshop, which the people love. Is there a last one, a playlist you can't get enough of right now? That's a new one. And I was like, why haven't I been asking this? This is where people go.
There's a new Florence and the Machine album that came out today that is
Find
called
that.
Everybody Scream, which I feel like is just chef's kiss
Perfect.
right now.
Perfect. I saw her once at the Hollywood Bowl or the Greek, I think, and was just like, I mean, it was 1,000 years ago, but it's just, I mean, incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm very jealous right now. No, she's fantastic.
That's awesome. We'll find the new Florence and the Machine album. I will be blasting down to the streets of Colonial Williamsburg later. Perfect. Well, listen, the hardships you went through to appear today are numerous and on no notice. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
We're trying, man. When people like, I can't look and see and touch and feel and taste and drink some progress. I do know what's out there because I'm so exposed to all this through all of this, but I understand it. And if we can do some way to facilitate that so people can go, oh, well, my town, we could do that. Or what are the examples of this in my town? Or what's transferable to my town? Least we can do. I really appreciate your time today. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. I got Denzel McCampbell on the phone. Denzel, tell us a little bit about where you're running and what office you're running for.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Quinn. And good to be here with you. Again, my name is Denzel McCampbell. I'm a candidate for Detroit City Council here in District 7. And born and raised in the city of Detroit, been on the city's east side. So for folks who aren't familiar, you know how some areas may be divided up by quadrants. And here in the city of Detroit, we're divided up by the east and west side. So now living in District 7 on the west side for the past 11 years, I'm a community organizer, someone who's been involved in working on the ground together with community around issues such as voting rights, environmental justice, equitable development, making sure that corporations, when they get money and tax subsidies to build things here in the city of Detroit, that they're actually giving back to community and it's not just a blank slate. I've worked on our city's charter, which is our governing documents, to push for a Detroit Bill of Rights that actually center folks' needs. And I'm just running for city council to make sure that we are paying attention and delivering for our neighborhoods here in District 7. We have a lot of children and a lot of seniors and marginalized groups that we really have to put at the forefront and deliver for. So again, it's good to be here with you.
Man, thank you for being here, for running, for fighting for your hometown. Most important question of the day is going to be, your website said you have a dog. Tell me about your dog.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a 11-year-old Yorkie named Minnie, and she actually runs this household. And the story behind Minnie is that back in 2014, I wanted a dog, and my mom then took Minnie from me because she wanted a dog, and that became her best friend. But unfortunately, my mom passed away in 2020. So folks are like, "Oh, what are you gonna do with Minnie?" I said, "Well, of course I'm gonna take Minnie." So she's been my sidekick ever since. She is a trip for sure.
That's awesome, man. The dog definitely runs the house for sure. I've had my line of them, and they do. I got my wife, who I answer to, and my kids, who don't answer to either of us.
Right.
And then my
Exactly.
dog, who kind of does what she wants. If there's bread on the counter, she's like, I've been fed. I'm good. I've got it.
No, no worries on me. I'm good.
I'm covered. No, you don't need to feed me the dry kibble shit. She's like, I ate the
Nope.
cinnamon rolls. That's amazing. Well, I want to talk about how Minnie has been endorsed by Run for Something twice in 2021 and now. Tell me a little bit how you got hooked up with those folks at first.
I came across Run for Something when I ran for Detroit City Clerk. And this is a role that is in charge of our elections, election administration. Again, I got my start organizing around expanding access to the ballot box. So that was something that continues to be dear to my heart, and came across Run for Something and really loved their mission around lifting up folks who are first time looking to run in their name, run for something, and whether it's at the city council level, the municipal level, state rep, what have you, and really breaking down these barriers to running for office, right? Because so often folks may feel like, oh, I have to be involved in this, or I have to have this amount of money, or have these connections. I got to connect with Run for Something to really break down and get rid of those barriers. And they were very helpful in 2021. And I'm fortunate to now be endorsed again by Run for Something here in 2025. And they continue to be helpful, and not just for me, but folks across the state of Michigan, across the country, and really saying, we need more folks, we need new voices, we need fresh leadership in these roles to really change the outcome for folks and deliver on people's needs. So I really appreciate them.
I love that. So I'm sure you don't have to explain to your constituents what the city council is and, what your powers and your duties and responsibilities might be. But take me back to, because there's such a focus from us and Run for Something and a lot of other groups about we have to fight for every office from like school board on up, sheriff, like you said, city clerk, this and this. How often when you started to run for city clerk, did you have to talk to people and they'd be like, what is city clerk? Like maybe you've heard of it, but what do you do? because that is such a problem in local elections, and they're kind of different in every town sometimes, in every city. Tell me about that, because it sounds, by the way you explained it, that you've had to do that many times before.
I had to do it a lot, right? When I
Yeah.
was running, and that's a great question. I think it also lends to the civic education, right? That we have to have with every level, right? And so it came across a lot. And like I said, with the city clerk, it's one of those roles that you don't know about until you really hear about, right? Going to vote, I will see, the folks who are working the polls, polling locations, but you probably are not going to see the city clerk, but you will see their impact and what they're running. The city clerk is also our record keeper and the holder of our seal. So as folks are interacting with city council, they actually keep the agendas and things. And that's the same in the city council as well. I would say that we have had to talk to folks about the power. That's why I also bring up my role in the Charter Revision Commission, because a lot of folks don't know, but also I would say a lot of folks that get into these roles don't know the extent of their power as
Sure.
well. Or the need to be able to break down that at the doors on the phones. When I ran for city clerk, and I'm continuing to push for what I call a civic education corps that actually has mostly young people, but folks of all ages in the community, partner with block clubs and neighborhood associations, that we're going door to door, meeting people where they are to talk about the issues that are impacting them and how it connects to each level of government and each office, right? Here in Detroit, we have a strong mayor system. So our mayor runs our departments. The mayor has a cabinet, and those are the folks that you will mostly call if you have an issue with like trash pickup, if you have an issue with taxes and such. But our city council is the legislative branch, and we have investigatory powers. We approve the budget, but we have that oversight as well on what the mayor does. So I've had to explain a lot when I ran for clerk. I had to explain a lot about that, but
Yeah.
also in the city council race, folks are familiar with city council, but it's also a conversation about here's what we can and what more we will. Yeah.
Imagine this. You get some goddamn notification about something you give a shit about, and you just want to stop what you're doing, whatever you're doing, and actually do something about it. You can't just live out here on the receiving end of these things. So you head to whatcanido.earth, and boom, right in front of you is our new intelligent starter action section. Front and center, exactly the action you want and need to take right now. Head to whatcanido.earth right now to check it out, because the world won't unfuck itself. Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely, man. And it's different everywhere. I say all the time on the show, I'm downtown Colonial Williamsburg right now, which is where I was born and raised, left for 1,000 years, but I'm back. But we've got the proper city of Colonial Williamsburg, which just Williamsburg itself the boundaries haven't grown in 400 years, and a whole county has grown up around it. A little like when I was in Los Angeles, there's Hollywood, and then there's West Hollywood, which is much bigger and surrounds the whole thing. And then there's all the rest of it. So we've got a city council and a mayor who's elected from the city council. So the mayor's not quite as powerful as in Detroit. Right. But we've also got a board of supervisors from the county, and like how those work with each other in the school system, which is a hybrid school. Like it's complicated. So I understand why people are like, I don't really know how this works. And they hear about people arguing over budgets, and you're like, okay, it's complicated. And man, I'm so with you and invested on the civics education front. And there's some fundamentals that are transferable, which I'm really interested in for everything we do, from education to policy. But again, then there's those little intricacies, man, that really matter. And roles like clerk, where you're like, this is what makes the machine work, keeping the records and keeping the seal, especially these days, right? You are the single source of the truth for a lot of this stuff.
And I appreciate you having this conversation and asking those questions, because also, as we see how the media landscape is changing, right? Especially as local newsrooms are getting smaller. We're in the city of Detroit, maybe 10, and we have some phenomenal folks on the ground that are still covering local aspects, but a lot of that has had to come from, nonprofits and really stand like in that space. But as we're thinking about accurate minutes for city council, being able to see how your city council member has voted on this issue or this contract or this budget, that brings into how more important like someone like a clerk would be. So absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit today about water. It is one of my, pet peeve, doesn't do it justice. It's like clean air again, being in LA or whatever. It should be pretty fundamental and not something that is a for disagreement, but it's complicated. It's obviously clean, accessible, affordable. Water is actually a million different things. So you mentioned 2014 and mini entering life. That's when Detroit's water issues were sort of front and center for the world for a minute. So
Yeah.
you don't have to explain why, because I think it inherently makes sense why that would be a platformer of yours, because between the water shutoffs and the crazy rain you guys had, infrastructure issues that a lot of cities face and things like that. Tell me specifically though, because again, this is the feedback we've gotten. What are you specifically fighting to make like measurable progress on, and what does
Cool.
that look like for folks?
And you are so right how it touches so many aspects, right? I would tell you just a little bit about the background as you're talking about water shutoffs. Like there's one story of a family, an older couple that had to melt snow really to have water to flush the toilet, right? Like in the richest country in the world, right? And we know that water is life, that folks need it to live. And what came out of that was a push for one, a water affordability plan of that says that no matter who you are, no matter how much money you make, you will have access to water, and we will actually allow you to pay what you can into the system so we can keep water flowing. And the pushback against the widespread shutoffs that folks were experiencing. And for folks who may be watching and listening, that may seem like a no-brainer. There are places that have done this in Philadelphia and other places across the country that have this. And just on the basis, as we think about what government is, right? This collective of folks that have put in resources to deliver on the basic needs. That's how I view government, right? To make sure that folks have their basic needs covered. Folks on the ground, advocates, organizers have long pushed for a true water affordability plan that actually, and pushing back on disinformation, opponents will say, oh, well, folks need to pay their fair share. Quinn, if you make $0, or if you are living in deep poverty and you don't have money to pay for water, what are we then telling folks,
Mhm.
right? That you don't deserve to live, basically.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah, when we really boil it down, like the
yes,
note behind the note is what you're saying is we're fine with the way this goes.
yes. And also ignoring the fact that when we actually go to folks and say, pay what you can, it actually gets more money into the system
Mm.
because then folks are not looking at a high water bill to say, I can't tackle that
Yeah.
because I have food on the table, right?
Yep.
I can't tackle that because now I have to pay my utility bill that is also outrageous because we have a private monopoly here in Michigan that continues to increase rates. So really thinking about how all these issues connected. So on the water aspect of getting folks water is really pushing on the local level for water affordability plan across the city, income-based water affordability plan, something that also State Senator Stephanie Chang and advocates have pushed on the state level to have a statewide water affordability plan that I was involved with on the advocacy side to help push. And just to bring a race into it, my opponent actually held up. It was at the very moment in a Democratic trifecta at the end of 2024 that we were very close to passing this legislation. And my opponent walked out and ended the session. So we could not get that legislation passed. So that's one tangible thing that I'll push for at the local level and
Your
continue to push.
current opponent?
Yes. So that's one thing. Then you talk about the infrastructure side. It's so funny that we use 100-year floods, to describe these big floods. And
Hmm.
in Detroit, we probably have had 5 or 6 100-year floods in the last decade. So they're historic 2-year floods at this point. But 2021, in my neighborhood, I had 2 floods within 1 month of each other. This was after I moved into my home. As you're moving in, you're trying to figure out where things gonna go. I mentioned my mom passed away. A lot of the sentimental things were in my basement as I'm figuring out where to put things, and my basement flooded. And, that happened to me, and it happened to many of my neighbors. Many of folks had, people had finished basements that they have sitting areas. And for the folks who may not, I know some areas don't have basements, but here in Detroit, many folks use their basement as an additional room,
Hmm.
additional living spaces, additional quarters, and just devastated folks across the board with floods. So there has been some work to go on with infrastructure upgrades, but for me, as I'm looking at it, is that we have to make sure that we're continuing to push for climate resilient infrastructure, infrastructure that delivers clean water to folks, that we're replacing, continue on a rapid pace to replace our lead lines here in the city of Detroit and delivering water, and also to take bold climate action against what we know will increase these floods and the frequency of devastating weather, making sure that the city of Detroit is accelerating this pace to be a carbon neutral city, that we're investing in not only here in District 7 on the west side, but on the east side where there has been flooding on the canals because the city of Detroit sits on the Detroit River, that folks experience flooding all the time. So really coming together with my colleagues to have a citywide plan to build climate resilient infrastructure, to deliver clean water, and to make sure that we are playing our part in not advancing the climate emergency that we're in.
I appreciate that so much, man, and your wide-ranging and at the same time deep understanding and perspective of both the intimate problems faced by yourself and people in District 7 and the west side and the east side in Detroit and everywhere, and that we have to do, and you guys have to do, and so many places have to do two things at once, right? We have to, as they say, adapt and mitigate. And part of that adaptation is not being afraid to say out loud where we are and the known knowns, as we say, which is that you're going to flood every 2 years. That's table stakes now. You can call it whatever the hell you want, but we're going to flood every 2 years, right? Is it disingenuous to say 100-year flood still everywhere? Yes, of course. We're going to flood every 2 years. Great. That's a starter. We've been, I think you tried to start replacing the lead pipes in like 2018, right? Something like that. And so many places are facing that, but obviously huge issue in Michigan. That's a no. That work is ongoing. Going from lead pipes that get overwhelmed and then plants that get overwhelmed and you got boil notices, right? Which right up the street here in Richmond, enormous problem the past year with that, to climate resilient infrastructure. Like, it's a leap, but you have to always come back to these people and say, I have been affected by this. I want to make sure that the pipes are not lead and that they're clean and they're not going to hurt your children's learning capacity, and that you're going to have plants that don't require a boil advisory, which, like, how do you boil when you can't pay your utility bill, right? How do you melt snow when you can't pay your utility? Like, we have to piece by piece get to these things. So I have such admiration for the specific ways you are fighting for this. Because again, that's what, when people say to us, I can't touch and feel this change, that is what will do it, right?
Absolutely. And, I know you have folks watching and listening from all over. And I know many municipalities are facing this, right? And I get this question often because what we see that's going on the federal level and the cutting of funds in these programs that a lot of municipalities depend on. I tell folks that we cannot let up on the advocacy, the pushing of our folks on the federal level, because it is going to take large investments. And it's unfortunate that in this last, not even a year, that we've seen many of those advancements and funding either frozen or cut, right? And for me, hoping to sit on the Detroit City Council is that I want to make sure that my colleagues, the incoming mayoral administration, our state legislators, our congressional delegation, that we are lockstep to say we have to do all that we can to bring these resources back down to the municipal level. Because again, this is impacting folks day in and day out.
It's water.
And it's water. And if we can't solve this, we are in deep trouble.
Yeah, that's a very professional way of putting it. So thank you. So you talked about we can't stop the advocacy. Okay, as you're trying to move into official capacity here on the city council, who are and will remain your advocacy allies pushing for clean, accessible, affordable water in the Detroit area?
Yep. So there are organizations such as the People's Water Board, We the People of Detroit, and there are organizations like Hydrate Detroit. We affectionately call the folks that have been working on these issues for decades our water warriors here in Detroit. And it's like, I tell folks that the solutions to our problems are in our neighborhoods, right? And these are folks that have been, delivering water to folks when they had water shutoffs, that when the Flint water crisis happened, dropped everything and went to Flint to help ensure that families had water. These are the folks that I take direction from, because these are the mothers of the communities that have been doing this work all the time. this entire time, that not only is doing the emergency response, but also developing policy to say, let's triage where folks are right now and let's have long lasting change so we don't have to continue to do this. Those are the folks that I will remain in partnership and advocacy space with. There are folks, as I mentioned, on all levels of government. Councilwoman Gabriela Santiago Romero has been one to talk about environmental justice. Councilwoman Letitia Johnson in Detroit as well, and dealing with infrastructure on the east side. State Senator Stephanie Chang, as I mentioned, has been leading the fight around water affordability on the state level. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who I had the opportunity to work with and be on her staff, has pushed on the federal level for more money around water infrastructure and water affordability. And even during COVID, pushed for there to be a moratorium on water shutoffs, right? And those are folks in the partnerships in the different levels of government that I really will work with to make sure that we have this really strong front in approaching this all and everywhere that we can.
I love that, man. I'm so glad for all your decades of water warriors. And again, it's not, for a lot of reasons, something we can pause on or stop at some point. Where, we work with so many nonprofits and advocacy folks who would love to put themselves out of business, right? Like kids cancer or some shit. They're like, I don't want to do this job. No one should have to do this job. Let's make it not stop. But someone has to do it until we can do it, right? Until you're ready to handle these floods that are going to come. Until you're ready to get rid of these lead pipes, until you're ready to do all this and make sure that, here's the deal, water can't be shut off. Let's just start there. Let's make it a fundamental human right. So understanding that is a pretty black or white, like measurable outcome. What have you found so far? What are you working on that you feel is transferable to more cities? Because again, like Michigan is very deeply dealing with this, obviously, and has been the focus of national and international coverage. But what else is transferable on the district and local level that you feel like other cities and towns and municipalities could catch up on?
I think it is, because I know that the answer will look different for different places. I think it is that coalition building that is transferable. And what I mean by that, we've constantly had spaces where nonprofits, advocacy organizations have been at the table with researchers, with folks that can dive deep into the data, folks that can look at other cities, and policymakers to say, here's the complete package, and also doing the organizing in the neighborhoods. I think that is the most transferable, is to not lose sight of that organizing space and that complete package of bringing everyone to the table to coalition build in that way. The reason I'm bringing that up is because we know that we're going to confront folks who are against this movement and will come with disinformation and try to bring in things that, oh, well, if we do this, we're going to just be paying water bills. No, it doesn't work like that. There are other places that have done this is how they've actually got more money. I would say that's the most transferable thing that I can offer, is that coalition building space that we can confront at every space, whether it's research, policymaking, advocacy, on the ground conversations, that we're building up a true coalition there.
I love that, man. I have two remaining important questions. One, I've been asking guests for years, and it's fairly standard, which is, what book is working for you these days? It could be water related or civic data, or it could be a coloring book or about dragons. What do you recommend? We got a whole list of a bookshop that people love.
I'm going to, because I'm telling you, my brain at this point is mush.
Like mine?
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. But there is a book that I really, especially in like thinking about the city of Detroit, and I think it's this historical context that a lot of people will look at where we have come from in Detroit and this breakdown of really, I would say, this corporatization and this view of, even in that conversation around water, oh, people just won't pay into it. But Who's Detroit by Heather Ann Thompson is a great book that folks, if you're going to get the audiobook or read it, will look into. And it really dives deep into the labor movement, politics in Detroit, and how race comes up in Detroit as well. Because folks may not know, Metro Detroit has a region that is deeply segregated, and how we see politics come up in that is something that I think people really need to take from. So Who's Detroit by Heather Ann Thompson is one that I would recommend.
Awesome. We'll find it. And last one, what's a playlist you've been rocking lately?
Okay. I love house music. There's the origins of house music in Detroit, but also there's this playlist on Apple that is like Afro house music, mixture of Afro beats and house music. So definitely recommend that. And also because that I've been trying to do, some grounding and meditation before I go into a day of campaigning. Surprisingly, Ariana Grande has a breathing playlist.
That's awesome.
And I love it because Ariana Grande is one of my favorite artists. So yeah.
Can I tell you some crazy shit? My wife
Yeah.
wrote the Wicked movies.
Really?
So Ariana has been like, my kids are like, oh, well, she's our hero. And I'm like, yes, correct. She is. You're welcome. But that's awesome. I will have to find her breathing list. That's awesome.
Great.
Rock and roll, man. Listen, Denzel, I can't thank you enough, man, for what you're doing and taking your time and sharing all that with us. I hope you win and crush this guy who walked out of the meeting. What a coward. Put that on your ad. I really appreciate it. Let us know anything we can ever help with, man.
Absolutely. And happy to keep you updated on this water fight as well. I appreciate you having me on for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, real quick. I'm an idiot. Give me your campaign details.
I was going to mention that, but Denzel McCampbell, again, candidate for Detroit City Council in District 7. Folks can go to www.denzelfordetroit.com and also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well.
Okay, rock and roll. We'll do that. We'll put it all in the show notes. Again, Denzel, thanks so much, man. That's it for this week, and I hope you loved these conversations and people as much as I do. Huge, huge, huge thanks to our partners at Run for Something for all of their hard work every day, but also to bring these conversations to life. As always, this conversation was produced and edited by Willow Beck. Reminder, you can find candidates who are endorsed by Run for Something and other awesome organizations we trust at whatcanido.earth. If you or someone you love is under 40 and wants to run for something at the state or local level but doesn't know what's available, head on over to runforwhat.net. And if you want to know more about our work, read our newsletters and essays, check out our other podcasts, or even get some of our awesome t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, or coffee mugs, head to importantnotimportant.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for giving a shit.